Everybody's got different personalities, and you have to learn how to mold yourself and learn how to communicate to that person based on their personality and your personality.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman, and on this show, we bring you ideas and insights from construction leaders across the country every single week to help you lead more effectively. This episode is brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. In under 30 minutes a month, for under $30 per month, every single sales rep in our industry can go and organize and with discipline, value the work that is coming down the line. In this uncertain economy, it's never been more important that we get really confident in our sales forecasts to understand what's happening with our profitability and our free cash flow. You can solve these issues in under 30 minutes for under $30 by visiting thesimplesalespipeline.com. I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with one Mr. Robson Pritchett. I run through his bio when we're actually together because he's worked in so many different aspects of the construction industry that I thought was really relevant to what we were talking about there. So I won't go through that now. What I will tell you, he attended St. Mary's University in San Antonio. Mascot? The Rattlers. That's right, the Rattlers. I need to swing down there and pick up that pennant. I don't have that one. He was a collegiate athlete. He played soccer down there, then ended up, as you will hear, kind of a meandering way in through engineering and then into construction. He is now a project manager at the Spartan Group, which is in Dallas. Now, Robson and I met on the board of Texo, which is a really unique and fantastic organization here in North Texas that brings in the AGC as well as the ABC. So it's one of the few organizations in the country that has both of those under the same roof. I've gotten a ton of value from it and really enjoy my time learning and in some small ways, giving back as being a member of the board. Well, we met there and I wanted to have him on the podcast to talk about leadership. He's a young leader. He's really thoughtful about what he does. And that alone, I wanted to talk to him about. And then, my friends, I found out that he started a quote unquote boutique camouflage company. That's right. Now, I'm from Chicago. The gun culture we have in Chicago is very different than the gun culture that is here in this unique country known as Texas. However, he had on this camo jacket that was really cool and it looked different. And I know nothing of this. I said, hey, what's the deal? I've never seen it. And he says, actually, I co-founded this company. And then my mind was just blown. So I said, I want to talk about all of this and more. And that's what we talk about here today on the show. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Robson Pritchett of the Spartan Group and the boutique camouflage company known as Hoot. That's right, Hoot. Why? Because the camouflage designs come from the most camouflaged predator on Earth, the owl. Yes, I know. So much information was learned by this guy. This is why I do a podcast. I learn a lot. So anyway, enjoy my conversation with Mr. Robson Pritchett. As always, thank you for watching and listening. Mr. Robson Pritchett, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here, man.
Well, my notes here indicate that we have a 7-hour podcast coming. We got a lot of stuff to cover here.
Hope you brought some spirits for later.
Right. Let's start here. Take me back. You're 12 years old. Tell me geographically where you are. Maybe tell me a little bit about your family, how many siblings you got, and what were you really into? What were you passionate about back then?
Sure. So we were in the booming town of Frisco, Texas. Still a ton of cornfields out there. Small town, really. And we're focused on playing soccer, playing sports, riding around the neighborhood with bicycles, getting lost in the creeks, and just being a kid.
It's funny to think about now. I moved to Texas 7 years ago, about 30 minutes west of Frisco. It seems like you're describing a different planet from what Frisco is today.
Absolutely. Totally different. We grew up in that boom, that big boom. Started with 2 schools, 2 elementaries, 1 high school. And then we opened up a ton of schools in Frisco. And then we saw all the major highways come and be built there. And it's just a wild ride growing in that environment, but also very heavily sports driven, very heavily community driven. We all knew each other. And even still, just the original Frisco people, it's a special bond, really.
I'm pretty sure there's several Texans driving around in the back of their pickup truck that says like native Frisconian or whatever you guys call yourselves, Friskite. I don't know, whatever that is.
I don't know, but yes, there's a couple of us.
So obviously you excelled at sports early. We're going to talk about maybe some of the leadership lessons you got from playing college athletics, from playing soccer in college. Tell me about the name, Robson. Little bit of an unusual name. Almost sounds like a last name. And I mentioned this and you're like, well, it's funny you mentioned that. So tell us the story about where that came from, because I think that's a bridge to where we're going to talk about from an athletic standpoint.
Yeah. So my dad, he was introduced to soccer about in middle school, never knew anything about soccer. And they came to a school and did a presentation, just like you'd sit in elementary school and get a presentation read to you. And he fell in love with the sport. And there's a English soccer player back in the 70s and 80s. His name was Brian Robson. And my dad fell in love with him, followed him. And actually, they had a family soccer shop. My dad and his mother had a family soccer shop in Oak Cliff way back in the day. And so kind of in his blood now. And he decided that was the name his son was going to be named. So that's where Robson came from. It was kind of crazy growing up in Texas with that first name, but I'm glad it's mine.
I've often wondered how like Americans who love soccer from like the OG football fans, right? And now people like me come along and like, I watch Welcome to Wrexham and I watch Ted Lasso. And then all of a sudden, and because now these games are on at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, I'm like, Manchester United. Yeah, I'm familiar with some of their strategies. How they picture like us Johnny come latelys to the sport is interesting to think about.
I mean, it's a worldly sport, right? I mean, we have American football, we have baseball here in the States, very popular, even basketball. But the biggest sport in the world is soccer, is football. And to know that and to grow up in the American culture is unique. A lot of naysayers and is soccer a sport, whatever. But now seeing the growth, and we knew it was coming through some of the developmental leagues and the youth development stuff. But to see it really take off now it's cool. It's world encompassing.
I fell into this rabbit hole, went to Spain last year with our family and started learning about the history of FC Barcelona and this guy named Johan Cruyff. I've become a miniature expert on anything Johan Cruyff. I've never heard of Brian Robson, but Johan Cruyff and him as a player from the Netherlands and then coaching, kind of fantastic thing, but so many great stories. And it's exciting to see there's this rich history of all these characters and all this drama that's just been sitting around invisible to everybody, but I just had no idea about it. So
yeah, the culture and history of football is very deep. And I mean, people live for this sport and everything is revolving around supporting that club. And to see that lifestyle, and we'll get into it a little bit, but seeing that lifestyle firsthand is very unique. It's very different than American culture, but it's awesome.
So your father played soccer collegiately. You followed in his footsteps, St. Mary's in San Antonio. Were there any sort of leadership lessons or situations that were positive or negative at the time that really stayed with you in terms of leadership or how to lead a team or what a good mentor or coach can mean to you that you say, hey, I think back to that time at St. Mary's often and some of the stuff that I went through?
Yeah, I think 2 words that come to mind is discipline. Getting an engineering degree and playing collegiate sports is something that I encourage everybody, maybe not soccer, but I encourage everybody to go down that path, every young person. But also there's some adversity there, dealing with upperclassmen and learning how to interact with teammates that it's very competitive. You're there to play. And out of 24 to 30 young men that were selected to come play soccer, there's 11 spots on the field. But they're also your teammates that you love, and there's a brotherhood there, but you're also trying to get on the field. So there's a competitiveness that you have to bring to the table. So you got to be your best self every day, practice field, training off the field, and obviously taking care of academics. So I think that adversity and discipline really has projected into my life.
Yeah, well, as you were talking about that, sometimes when you're coming in as an 18-year-old freshman and there's like a fifth-year senior and he's 23, it seems like it's a different species. However, I had kind of that experience and then showing up at a job site, and then there's someone who's 34 and they've been on the job site for 12 or 13 years. And you're looking around and you're like, it's the same thing. And I think one of the things that you mentioned of just a theme throughout your career, multiple businesses we're going to talk to, was just the importance of relationships. And what have you learned about whether it's a freshman versus a fifth-year senior, or coming on a job site where there's the angry dude who's been here for 30 years, but if you get on his right side, he's going to help you learn so much. What have you learned about building relationships and building trust quickly?
Yeah, sure. There's different personalities. Everybody's got different personalities, and you have to learn how to mold yourself and learn how to communicate to that person based on their personality and your personality. That's the same on the soccer field, and learning, how do I communicate with this person on the soccer field, and how do we mesh? And that's the same in business as well, in the construction world especially. You have an old superintendent that is set in his ways, and you got this young guy that really is wet behind the ears. How do you allow him to teach you, or how do you convince him to teach you, right? There's a trust factor and a relationship factor there that you've got to mold yourself to be available.
How have you done that in your career? How have you shown someone that it's worth the effort for them to kind of pour into you when everybody's busy? We got a whole bunch of distractions and a whole bunch of responsibilities on the job site.
I think the first step is to care where you're at, be where your feet are at, be present in what you're doing, and also bringing a little humor to the table. We're all here to do a job, and we're all here to go home to our families, and let's take it lightly, but we're taking it seriously, right? We're serious, but we're also going to have a little fun with it, and being a little bit less rigid is very important in all aspects of life. And I think bringing a little comedic value every now and then really has allowed me to build some relationships in the field that maybe some others struggle sometimes with.
Robson, as I look at your career, and I will condense it here, seems like you got a lot of experience in different aspects of the business in general of construction, but also with different types of people. You got some experience in insurance, did a little manufacturing, oil and gas. You work for a GC, you work for a sub. How have those experiences all kind of helped you to really lead better now in the position that you're at?
Very good question. Paying attention and being where my feet are, and learning, constantly learning from other people, whatever the industry was, learning how to communicate with people, learning how to build relationships. Doing the actual job is the easy part. The hard part is building a relationship, building the trust, and then going and attacking and being a team in that environment to succeed. That's the biggest thing in business, or whether it's automotive industry, which I was in for a couple of years, or oil and gas, or even construction. I mean, it's all about relationships, and you're going to have problems, and those relationships and how you deal with those problems is everything.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your experience. You got to live in England for an extended period of time, and sounds like you can fill in the blanks, but you were there for 3 months and then you were off. So you had these shifts where you were there. I'm always interested to talk to folks when they have been the stranger in a strange land, where you've been forced to kind of reevaluate how we think and how we see the world. And there's this other group of people that look and sound somewhat similar, but are totally different. So maybe tell us just a little bit about that experience, and what did you learn from those cultural differences? And I'm sure there's, many cultural similarities as well.
Yeah. Number one, I'm an American. And if you've ever traveled outside the country, you know what that means. And number two, I'm a Texan. So when I go to North England and Newcastle, they're manufacturing offshore flexible pipe for oil and gas production. And I'm a Texan. They expect cowboy hat and a horse. It is hilarious. And then they see me come in the door and I don't have a cowboy hat on, which I left it at the house. I'm not riding a horse.
I had it. I didn't bring it.
I didn't bring it because it's hard to put on a plane. But then how do you connect with a different culture, right? You're traveling, you're staying in a hotel or in a loft or whatever they want to call it. And how do you break the barriers? They have their normal family, their culture. And I did that a little bit through soccer, right? Going and playing some five-a-side soccer with them. As an American, they're thinking, oh, this guy. And to have a little bit of skill and be able to knock it around with them, it creates this immediate bond, right, through sport. And the next day in the office, it totally changes the perception. And now we're going out and having beers on Friday. And it's just being able to find that cultural commonality. It goes back to the relationship. How do you connect? How do you build a relationship? And then everything kind of just goes from there.
Yeah. Well, I've had some success doing that where I had to do a little bit of research, but even with Spanish speakers who, whether they're from Mexico or the Honduras or Puerto Rico, of tapping into what they're passionate about. And folks like, hey, there's like an NBA and you got the NFL. Well, there's a Mexican soccer league. And if you know those teams and you know kind of what state they're from or what territory, right away you can talk smack a little bit, but immediately breaking a pattern when there's a tall, skinny ginger, kind of talking smack about, the Pumas or what have you. So I can imagine that helped you. By the way, how immediate was it that your name was Robson and I didn't know this, you told me that Brian Robson played for Manchester United, correct?
Yeah, he played on the English national team.
Okay.
So everybody over there knows who Brian Robson is. And when they see the first name Robson, it's also very popular in Brazil as a first name.
That's interesting.
But they see my first name and they're like, where did you get that name? That's usually a surname.
Yeah.
So it's named after Brian Robson, and it's also another commonality, right? How to break in the ice, how to break the barrier. Like, wow, that's interesting. Texas boy named Robson.
That's right. Yeah, you're binational. You're an American, but you were also a separate country that is known as Texas. Right? That's part of it. So let's transition here. So you're coming up through your career. You come back to the United States. At what point does this idea of Hoot, or how early in your career and your life does this idea or this potential idea of what will become Hoot, when does that first get initiated?
So this is right as I got out of college, my first hunting season out of college. So 2011 is when I was pitched on the idea of Hoot. Kind of was around the idea for a long time growing up, but really the first time I was pitched to it by one of my dad's best friends was right out of school. In 2011, he pitched me, and he actually had some textile with him of a rough pattern, basically a copy paste printed on fabric image. And I fell in love with it. But I was still very green and wet behind the ears, chasing this idea of an engineering career.
Okay.
And so bookshelf, right? So that evolved, I guess 12 years later or 10 years later, it evolved into met a mutual friend that we grew up with, actually a high school rival of mine on the soccer field. And he invited me to a family ranch. I pitched him on the Hoot idea. He has some graphic background and he loved it. And that week we had a pattern and I repitched it to Glenn, one of my dad's buddies. And we said, let's do this thing.
I buried the lead here. So what was the pain point or the idea that Glenn said, hey, we're out here, and for someone who's relatively interested yet very ignorant in the hunting and the fishing. I'm come from Chicago. I'm still trying to pick up some of these skills that you guys were born and raised with. But what was it where you said, hey, listen, yeah, there's all these other companies that are doing this stuff, and yet here I am. I think there's an opening. There's a position for us to fill. What was that?
So in Texas, most of our favorite color is camo. I mean, that's just a fact. But all the textiles, all the camouflage brands are pushing the trees and the bark and maybe some digital patterns. Like back in the day, there was a rattlesnake pattern, or there's some other patterns out there, but it's all digital or based on nature in the landscaping of nature. And the fact that he was thinking outside the box, going back to God's creation to say, this has worked for millions of years. How do we use that and change the game? And right there, I fell in love with it. It's like, that is so different, and I love different. And to bring something like that to the market is really unique. Been a very unique growing experience for us, and we're on the journey.
Well, it's funny, this idea of like multidisciplinary thinking, which is, here's what we're trying to do. What are things from other realms, whether it's physiology or biology or the nature and environment around us? But what triggered in my mind that's kind of stuck back there was you said you guys or Glenn was like, you were hunting quail or something. You're like, we can't see any of these things. Like, how are we supposed to shoot things we can't even see? Like, they were disguised so well. And meanwhile, yeah, we're blending. The idea of the rattlesnake, I'm sure someone listening has a rattlesnake camo jacket. They might be mildly offended by this. But if you just think about that idea, how often are you surrounded by like a million rattlesnakes where like you would literally blend in? Now, I understand the idea behind how snakes probably have that advantage through evolution. So is that it? He basically said, hey, these birds are already doing it. And it's not the trees, it's themselves on, how they've evolved over years, right?
Yeah, it's going back to nature and God's creation. And it's right there. It's under our nose.
Yeah.
We're hunting these birds and we can't find half of them. Where are they? They're right under our nose. Why are they right under our nose? Well, we can't see them. They're camouflaged. So it's very basic thinking. I mean, it's just old Texas boys being funny, maybe had a cocktail or two on the tailgate of a hunting vehicle, but that's how we were raised. And that idea has transformed into what Hoot is now. And we're excited to see what we can do in the market.
So there's a couple of distinctive things that jumped out at me. So fast forward 5 or 6 months ago, you and I are on the board of Construction Association, and you come in wearing this stuff. And I said, I've never seen anything like this. And I'm pretty sure up front, I said, I'm ignorant of all this. So if this is a huge brand and everyone's wearing this, I'm just missing it. But I said, what is it? And what is Hoot? And you're like, oh, two things. You're like, the owl is one of the most camouflage predators in the wild. Didn't know that. And that's why. And then I immediately saw the eye and the cool logo. And I said, yeah, this is our brand. I'm like, our brand? What do you mean it's our brand? And then the other thing that I noticed too was just this pattern, this hexagonal pattern. I think on the one that you had, it must have maybe it was on the shoulder or something that kind of stood out. And then I was like, wait a minute, you've started a hunting brand on the side. And that kind of led us down to ultimately where we are here today. So maybe take me back to Glenn plants this idea. It's kicking around for a while. And all of a sudden you said, all right, I think we're going to go we're going to take this idea of a pattern. We're going to put it on a jacket. Tell me about maybe that period and a little bit about the positioning, because I see when I drive down 635 into Dallas, is it QU?
Yeah.
KUIU, which I won't share my feelings. And I don't mean to bring up the actual names of your competition, your respected competition, but I see that and I see people wearing it. And I have many friends who are native Texans who are big into this, and they're wearing all this gear. My guess is this is a pretty competitive space. And you evaluated the landscape and said, I think we got something different here. And not only that, we're going to put our time and energy and money into this. So maybe tell me about those early stages where you said, where would we fit in on this? And we're not indirectly and inadvertently competing against a huge competitor who's kind of doing the same thing with a ton of money, who's going to try to kill us.
Sure. So there's 4 of us total. 3 of us are in the construction space in DFW. The other one is in the advertising marketing space, and he works for a national brand. So we're all working fathers, husbands, and we came up with this to try to just really create some awesome camouflage for our buddies, for people like us, weekend warriors that are working their butt off during the week, try to get to the deer stand or into the field on the weekends after a soccer game. And so that target market really has pushed most ideas for us. So what works in actual physical characteristics of the gear, but also the price point, a little bit cheaper than some of the top brands, the known brands, but also what works and what's cool. Like when I walk into the diner after a duck hunt, we're turning some heads because nobody's ever seen this pattern. And it's a little bit lively, but it's different, and people love different. And that's what we're bringing to the table.
So Robson, you get this idea, you're surveying the landscape. At what point did you believe, like, you have the confidence to do this? Like, this is a thing. We can do it. I can do it. No, we've never done anything like this before. And we have no idea how this thing works, but we can do it. Where did that confidence come from? Is that something you think you had, back when you were 12 years old, or was it kind of nurtured through your relationships and kind of the progression of your career? Maybe just tell me a little about that.
Yeah. So I've got an entrepreneurial spirit have my whole life. Never been afraid to build something, never been afraid to try something, being in multiple industries and being able to jump from these vastly different industries and then finally landing in construction and then building a ton of relationships with like-minded men and females, ladies in construction, just gives me the confidence to go attack anything. And having the right idea and the right people around me and the right support system really has given me the confidence to just do whatever, just follow the dreams. And this is a dream of ours and we're going to chase it. And, we have our day jobs. We're in construction. We're in different organizations in construction. A young leadership organization I'm a part of is the Young Constructors Council through Texo, which is where we met through the board at Texo, which I think back and think about the first time you saw the Camo was in a board meeting. It's absolutely hilarious, but we're in Texas and it was winter. So
what else are you going to wear?
it's okay.
Yeah.
But just having those like-minded people around me to just let me be free and explore those and also have that support, right? Everybody we show this to loves it. They love it. It's unique. And how many people do you know are starting a clothing brand, especially in the hunting market? So it's just unique, but following that dream and having that support system around us in our construction space with everybody, it's been a very unique and cool experience so far.
Let me ask you just a little bit more about the YCC, because this was something where I kind of joined Texo, got more involved, kind of aged out of that a little bit. And I think maybe giving just a little bit of context to what it is, how it helped you would be valuable for two reasons. Number one, anyone kind of, especially in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, to be aware of what it is. The other part is, I think, for folks around the country who are looking at this huge baby boomer demographic that is retiring and taking a lot of the talent and wisdom. Some of this question about how we're getting young talent and engaging them and getting them really excited to become this next generation of leaders is a challenge that exists everywhere. So I think for people that are listening that are like, well, I don't know. So some associations doing something in Dallas, are there fundamentals and the ways that you've delivered and received value from it? I do believe it's replicable. So maybe give a little kind of overview of the YCC and how you got involved and what sort of value you got from it.
Sure. So joining or getting into the construction market a little bit, I wouldn't say later in my career, but I was a few years into an engineering career when we had our daughter, and I was overseas for basically half of the first 3 months or 4 months of her life. And we decided, hey, we need to get back to some support system in Dallas, moved from Houston to Dallas, and okay, where do I go from here? I know a little bit of roofing from my insurance days, sold a couple roofs, and then leaned on my network, leaned on my family, and ended up at a very well-known general contractor here in town. And they trusted me and they saw kind of some value there, but I had to go start at the bottom again. So starting at the bottom, getting on these job sites, learning the trades, learning construction, that's pretty daunting, especially in your late 20s as you're entering this space. And a lot of guys go to school to do this. And I didn't. I've just got an engineering management degree, but being in multiple spaces, I was like, okay, I can do this. So I stepped in, and Hill & Wilkinson was who I worked for at the time, and they encouraged me to jump into the Texo Young Constructors Association, or Young Constructors Council. And I was like, what is this? Well, it's guys and gals that are voted on to go in this program, just go and network together and do some leadership training together and just build relationships. And it's like, oh, it's right up my alley. I'm a little bit late to the game, so let's go network as fast as we can. And that's really led to, I've been serving with the YCC for about 7 years now, jumped on the steering committee pretty quickly into that, just with a passion to meet people and also lead. We've got now 16 on the steering committee and over 300 members of the Young Constructors Council. It's probably the largest construction young group in the country, which is very unique. But we've had everybody from, we have speakers yearly. We've had Jesse Itzler. We've had a ton of well-known speakers come and talk to us. Evan Hafer from Black Rifle Coffee last year. So we have an opportunity with some funds and belief through these companies that send their young up-and-coming leaders to this program. We have this ability to not only build relationships with each other, but also network with other companies that do the same thing, which is very unique.
Yeah, because I've been on the outside, joining the board, I guess 2 years ago, just hearing so many people talk about it. Said, I kind of came in when I was 29 and then changed my life, changed the way I build relationships, introduced me to new leadership ideas, kind of pulled me out from being in the business on a specific job site to really kind of thinking about the business, like working on the business and kind of seeing it from more of an executive level. So I would encourage people to check out Texo Association and then the YCC. I think you guys did a really nice job of just kind of providing that playbook. And yeah, it takes some courage for companies to say, I'm going to invest outside of the money. Yeah, there's some capital involved, but also I think just the time, but recognizing, saying, hey, I'm going to pour into you and you're special. We believe it. And I want you to be part of this. It's proven to totally change the trajectory of individuals' careers and yours included.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, when we get on a job site and we face adversity, we're leaning on the relationships that we have to fight that. Obviously, our colleagues, but also outside of that. I may have met somebody through the YCC that I would never work with, but I can call him for some advice in dealing with said problem. And those love relationships have worked wonders for many of us in the group. So it's encouraging.
Like the little kind of personal board of directors idea. These are people that I can call who I can speak freely and they can kind of tell me, hey, you're viewing this wrong. Or they can also kind of confirm what you're already feeling, but from a distance is just invaluable. But all right. We're going to jump back in, talking to Hoot. So here you are, year one of manufacturing. It's 2021. I was around in 2021. The idea that it seemed like every supply chain known to man was broken in either a catastrophic way or just mildly terrible. You guys are rolling in and saying, hey, we're gonna start this new brand. I got to find a manufacturer. Tell me about that process, because that seems to me like ridiculously daunting.
It was an interesting time in all of our lives. We're coming out of pandemic, still very prevalent, very big mask mandate.
Texas was coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
By 2021, yeah. Texas was like, we're good. We're moving on.
But, you still had the mask going on. But,
yes.
My wife and our wives had challenged us to do this. Not that we have
What does that mean? Our wives challenged us to do this.
Yeah.
My wife challenged me to mow the lawn and, fix some trim board that's rotting out on the house. Your wives are pushing you to develop a new clothing brand.
Yeah, I think they got tired of us talking about it. So they just said, y'all need to just go ahead and do it. No, they were super supportive of us. And they just said, why don't you follow your passion? Follow your passion. You have a passion for the outdoors. You have a passion for people. You have a passion for this camouflage brand that really you haven't done anything with. So let's go do something with it. Right now is the perfect time, right during the post-pandemic. Supply chain's crazy. This is the best time to learn. They didn't necessarily tell us that, but that's what we thought. It's best time to learn. Let's just go get in the trenches. And Rome wasn't built in a day. Now let's just go for one step at a time. And so we went and outsourced some textiles, wanted to go US made. Obviously, we realized quickly how expensive that was. So we went just like every other manufacturer, other than maybe a couple of camouflage manufacturers, it's overseas. So we worked through that communication and we got our first sample. Through that sample, we've adjusted a couple things, and new to the industry was like, we really like this. Let's just release 50 sets. We like it. It's good camo. Let's release 50 sets. Well, we get all 50 sets and none of it fit.
I'm assuming, whether it's too big or too small, my guess is it too small? Like what was wrong with it?
Yeah. Pure Tommy boy. Just pure Tommy boy action. Everything fit tighter in the arms, tighter in the shoulders. We have a different build. So huge lessons learned there on specifications, right? We live around specifications in the construction world. And we didn't know that the clothing industry had the same deal. So specification, sizing. So right off the bat, I wouldn't call it an L because we learned a ton of stuff and it looked fantastic. So we sized up a couple sizes and we wore it. Kind of hard to sell stuff that doesn't fit, but we knew we were in this for the long game. So went back to the drawing board this next year, really dialed in. Okay, what are we looking for in our gear? What works for us? What do we think is cool? What do we not like about other gear? And we sat around the table and we wrote it all down and we created this second line of gear and tweaked the pattern a little bit. And we're proud of this one. We were proud of it, but ever changing. This is an ever changing brand with camouflage, and this pattern specifically, we can change this pattern a million times with tons of different owls that are indigenous to different regions. So we have this big, long play and idea, but we're at the starting blocks now.
I'm going to come back to this. You casually mentioned, Bradley, you're probably aware there's 5 major regions around the United States, and there are local indigenous owls to each, and we can customize them to each one. Stuff came out of my ear. I'm like, all right, I'm going to set that aside for a minute because that sounds amazing, that kind of mass customization. But before we get there, I do want to ask you, how do you guys think about this tension that exists between having ambitious goals and wanting to go after them and committing time and money and resources that is extremely finite, yet at the same time saying we're in the long game and we're going to have patience, and we know that even if the first 50 sets, we have to find small children willing to wear them because they're not fitting. I'm probably blowing it out of proportion, and also saying that's okay because it doesn't have to be perfect because we're giving ourselves that runway. I think leaders in all businesses, we're working with a couple clients right now that I think are struggling where there's this intense pressure and the messaging from the top of the organization that we got to do this and we got to be flawless. If that's the expectation from the leaders at the top, even if whether it's one person or it's 4 or 100, all of a sudden the stress and the anxiety and just, I think people afraid to make a decision to move this thing forward really gets hard. So I don't know, maybe just talk a little bit about that. And maybe there was no tension, but I just see that between, you got to do both things at the same time. You got to say, hey, we're going to be hungry and we're going to be ambitious, but let's not overthink it. Let's give ourselves some latitude because we're not experts at this yet.
Yeah. So number one, we're family men. Being present for our families is everything for us. And so that's the number one priority. Number two, we're businessmen. We've got to provide for our families and we want to do well at that in our markets that we're in. So there's 2 major key points in our life that we have major focus in. This is a hobby for us, but it's also a lifestyle that we've kind of molded into, and we're growing our network in this industry and we're just letting it come to us, but we're also pursuing it with the same force and just letting it flow. And I think when you take off the pressure of really, we want to be the biggest brand, we want to do this, we want to push the market, we got to get into the retailers next week. You take that pressure off and let it come to us. And we've seen the ebb and flow, and it's kind of coming to us now. We've got guys approaching us about building marketing plans and how do we jump into this market on a retail scale. And we've got a couple programs coming up, and we're just kind of letting it come to us, but also pursuing it just equally. So going back to the Hoot brand and kind of what led us there, there's a ton of stuff that we don't think about. And, we have the family and we have our day-to-day business lives, and the whole relationship deal and how it's played into my career and where I'm at now with my current group. It's called Spartan Group, launching a new large industrial concrete group here in DFW market. Just having the right friends and relationships around me to bring me to the table that trust me, that have seen the discipline and the growth to then go push and grow a business alongside a hobby business that they know I'm going to have to spend some time in. Having that trust is everything, and having that relationship that we've built with the group I'm with now, plus them trusting me in Hoot, is everything. And I encourage everybody to just grow relationships with your fans, with your friends, with guys that support you, build your circle strong, because those are the guys that are going to take you to the next level.
Yeah, I was thinking about Spartan Group here, understanding you have this passion, this entrepreneurial journey you're on, and some people might see that these are a conflict and they're at odds. There's only one person, where you're going to spend your time. The thing that I've seen, I think in less dramatic ways than what you've done with Hoot, is that there are immediately new transferable skills that I learn here that I apply there. And all of a sudden, it's not Hoot's over here and Spartan Group's over here. It's, you know what? There's this Venn diagram where these circles overlap. And I met somebody who's thinking about, or is a broker for a new distribution center. They're going to need a ton of concrete. And all of a sudden, that came from over here. And it's all kind of blended. So I kind of hat tip to whoever the individuals who are here who are leading Spartan Group that are giving you that opportunity, because I'm sure there's already been overlap.
Oh yeah, there's some synergy there. Part of our custom program that we're launching is we can provide gear for field labor, or even if you're going on a fishing trip or a hunting trip, we can put your logo on our gear. And it's just another way to get fans or people in our gear, but also supporting small business or large business. So it's just a unique way to get our camouflage out there or our gear out there, and having that support from our employers is awesome.
Absolutely. So let's do this. As we wrap up here, why don't you let people know if they're interested in learning more about you and Spartan Group, where they can do that? And then let's transition into where people can learn more about the gear, which is awesome. Also, I know there's going to be a lot of people who are listening who are interested in kind of that gear customization for corporate settings to put their branding on or their patches or whatever they're into. So maybe start with the Spartan Group where people can learn more and then transition to Hoot.
Yes, Spartan Group nationwide, Spartan reinforcing. We tie and supply rebar for large commercial projects. And then we also do some commodity trading as well in the rebar world, the reinforcing world, and then the concrete world here in DFW. Spartan Group, we got a website, reach out to me directly, or we can get together on how to do that. As far as Hoot goes, we do most of our social media through Instagram, and then we have a website, hunthoot.com. All purchases online right now, all e-commerce. And that's kind of how we see it going forward. And then we're a brand of the people. So reach out to any of us. We've got our information online or through social media, and we are right at the tip of your fingers, really.
Hunthoot.com.
That's it.
Got it. All right. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you making time here. Big fan of entrepreneurship. Obviously, love construction. You brought all that together. And the minute I saw that jacket at that board meeting, I'm like, dude, we got to talk. We got to set this up. So I appreciate you making time. And dude, congrats on all your success. And I am fully confident that we're just going to see this thing take off even more. So whatever's coming next is going to be fun. And this is also inspiring to people like me. We're like, hey, we have some crazy ideas that might seem a little bit out there that, can follow your lead. So thank you. Best of luck in the future.
Thank you very much.
All right, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Robson Pritchett. We had a blast being together. I really enjoyed meeting the individuals he works with at the Spartan Group and seeing their office. As you can see in the video, just a fantastic layout, a great place to record a podcast. So we hope to be there in the future. Once again, a lot more to talk about. So if you're not familiar with the Spartan Group, go ahead, look them up. They are here based in North Texas. And obviously you're going to want to check out, especially if you're a hunter or if you're just like a northern city slicker like myself and you want something cool to stand out, you can check it out as well. It's Hoot, H-O-O-T. And you can find more at hunthoot.com. Yeah, say that 10 times fast. So if you are listening to this as audio only, you are missing out on a big part of the way that we hope to deliver more value. We're recording these as videos. So we're putting out the whole thing on YouTube. We're also slicing and dicing it, putting it into smaller chunks to make it easier to share within your team and your customers and friends, whoever you care about and want to help them become better leaders. That's why we're doing it. You can learn more and subscribe on YouTube. Just search Bradley Hartman & Co. and you will see this conversation with Mr. Robson Pritchett. This episode is brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. In under 30 minutes a month, for under $30 per month, you can have every salesperson in your organization organize and value their sales pipeline so you can better forecast what is coming down. And now, after about a decade or so of really tremendous growth with interest rates that are rising, we should all have a healthy paranoia about where our future sales are coming from. You can solve this problem by going to thesimplesalespipeline.com. If you got value from this conversation with Mr. Robson Pritchett, please leave us a review on whatever podcast player you are listening to. That means more to us than you know as we strive to grow our audience and hopefully deliver more value. So we're going to close out like we always do. Thank you for listening. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.